listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to Pop, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible.
You are listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys and games. I am engineer, artist, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm Branson Faustini.
A dungeon builder extraordinaire. That's D&D. I don't think you actually have a dungeon.
That you know of.
That I know of, yeah.
There are lots of podcasts out there that talk about toy and game news, reviews, and gameplay, but we want to bring you behind the scenes to introduce you to the people who actually make toys and games.
Yeah, we want to ask some of those questions of where did that idea come from?
How did they make it real?
And how has it changed your life? And boy, do we have a treat for you today. I'd like to welcome Dan Klitsner. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I am excited about the dungeon mostly.
Well, you'll have to come see it, I guess. We're in part of it right now, right here in the studio. So Dan is the founder and creative director of a toy inventing and licensing firm, KID Group. And Dan, you have had your hands on, you've ideated, invented just countless classics, including Bop It, Perplexus, and 4-time Toy of the Year. Dan, you are a veteran that has touched the lives of everyone in around the world. I'm just curious out the gate here, was that your goal growing up, was to become this toy and game inventor? How did this all start?
It started out with me drawing a lot of monsters as a kid, probably very similar to a lot of kids out there, or grown-ups now who were kids who drew monsters and now, wish they could draw monsters. So I think, I started out really drawing a lot as a kid and tinkering with things and building things. And I think that, I like to say it really has traced through, and I still love to draw. And as I developed, of course, eventually found a way to put that creativity into creating games and toys, because probably besides drawing monsters and tinkering with stuff, I liked playing games a lot with my family and with friends.
Were there classics that you went to as a kid? What were you playing with then? I do remember things, like Mousetrap or playing with Hot Wheels, or, I grew up in the 60s where there were some incredible games like that to play with, very classic things. And, Thing Maker and, stuff that was very classic 60s stuff, an Etch-a-Sketch. I probably played with all those things that are now classics, and they were even classic then, many of them. Games that I remember, though, most would have been more about the people, playing Spoons, if you've ever know what that game is, with my family, or Cribbage with my dad, or Pinochle with my grandmother. I really connected with people playing games. That's sort of how it goes. You get around the table, whether it's D&D or Mousetrap.
That's right. Whether it's you're playing a video game, sitting there with 4 people all playing Mario Kart, or I really think that's the commonality that I love about games, really more than toys, is that they're really intended to connect people. And it's my, I think from the time I was little, I loved that connection, and I've been searching for it ever since. What's the next way to connect? What's the newest thing that that feeling in your heart when you think back and go, that was a great time and a great memory with those people. And I think that's what drives me to say, what's the next one?
I hear it's the families that play together stay together. That's
yeah.
The thing.
Or they argue. They probably argue a lot together too. but they turn the table over, they throw things, but they still play. It's within the container of play, hopefully.
Well, that's good. So growing up as a childhood artist, isn't that the direction you ended up going through for school and everything, was into some of the art programs, industrial design?
Well, I actually started out not knowing what I wanted to do. I think this is the part most relevant to
the field of a lot of people went into toy design. I don't know when they discovered they wanted to do it, but for me, it took a while. I was artistic, but I really had a sense that I didn't want to be an artist, a fine artist. I felt, more functional about things. And I don't know I didn't know what industrial design was. So looking into schools, I went to UC Davis first in engineering, mechanical engineering, because I didn't want to be an architect either. It didn't appeal to me whatsoever. And that was sort of a guidance counselor. Oh, you should go architect. I don't want to design buildings. I want to design stuff. Oh, then you go into engineering. And I was miserable and tried to turn all the projects into more like I had some old drawings, I wish I could find them, where I would take a project and instead of doing the calculations, I would draw something that looked like the answer. And eventually my father actually sent for a catalog to Art Center College of Design. He had been talking to someone, just mentioned something, and said, oh, that's industrial design. And he sent away, brought it back, showed it to me. And I cracked the thing open and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to design stuff. I didn't know you could do that. And it was just the way it was done. It was student work. I can remember it to this day, like, a blender and a car sketch and all the things that typically industrial design students know. And I just got so excited. I said, I have to do this. And that changed my life and sent me, I then left there, went and did a portfolio, did all the things I needed to do. I was just hell bent on getting in there and I loved every minute of it.
That's awesome. Yeah. From monsters to engineering.
Well, in fact, I brought a couple sketches I did at Art Center. I dug out of the archives. And lo and behold, this was a chrome study. And it's a monster.
Oh, wow.
You had to come up with a way to render chrome. So I turned it into a rendering of, invented this little creature that, had as many surfaces that were easy to do in chrome as possible, like spheres and compound surfaces. So
that looks like a Burning Man sculpture at this point.
Yeah. And then the next year, or next time we had the same assignment, I just did another monster in chrome. So I have these two chrome monsters that were done in gouache and acrylic. I just, that was, you can see why I loved it. It was like, well, that's exactly what I was doing as a kid, but now really turning it into something that had more of a industrial design bent to it.
Yeah, I'm convinced that most toy inventors never actually grew up. I think there's like there are those of us that just sort of stopped developing around 8 years old and kept that creative brain.
No, I'm convinced that most people never grew up. So,
that's awesome.
That's why people like to play games. See, so that's why it works.
So with the industrial design, because with KID Group and everything, you weren't initially just doing all toy design. You were developing products for other types of brands.
Yeah, I started out as sort of a freelance industrial designer. KID was Klitsner Industrial Design. It intentionally spelled kid because I had started to look at toy design. I started out freelancing, doing actually remote controls. One of my clients was Memorex, and this was some remote controls from 1990 something. It was some of the first universal remotes. This is actually a mock-up. This is just a foam core mock-up here. It looks very real. I did, so I was doing industrial design. I was doing bottle design, like freelance stuff for different companies. And I also had a client, Discovery Toys, which was, I did things like, well, I've got them here, don't have them quite too handy, but they're, baby rattles, and Discovery Toys at the time sold in-home sales, and they were importing all their stuff, but locally here in the Bay Area, they were deciding they wanted to do their own proprietary products. They had scaled. So I was the only sort of designer that they used as a freelancer. And I probably for 6 or 7 years created most from Marble Works. Grand Prix was one people know. Gearopolis was a pretty well-known, one of the first three-dimensional gear toys. So I was able to sort of be inventive with them as a designer because they just needed, they were looking to do classics, but with sort of a proprietary twist.
awesome. There's a lot of those things that we use every single day, like a TV remote, a mouse, beach toys, whatever that might be, that we don't realize the intentionality that somebody.
Are you giving me a segue to my beach toy? Is that what you're doing?
I don't know if I am, but I'm just saying the intentionality behind every one of those things. Just, I do know that your brain has touched things across the board, and there probably isn't a home that doesn't have something you haven't designed or that you.
Well, that's not. It's possible. There's a couple things that come to mind. So yeah, in the timeline as an industrial designer, working at Discovery or for Discovery Toys as a freelancer, working on these different clients, Memorex. It was just very busy. I was also doing architectural illustration. Probably half of my work at least was before computers, doing drawings. Architects, different designers would have a space, and I could draw architecture quite well. I just didn't like designing architecture. I just was very clearly focused on things you touch, tactile, things you hold in your hand. It's been a very constant theme. I think it's interesting how designers, have really gravitate towards certain things that they're tuned to. Graphic designers, I'm always in awe of how amazing they can just make graphics work. I think I'm a pretty good designer, but I can't hold a candle to a great graphic designer when it comes to their skill. And I think that's, the way it is with a lot of design. But my thing is the hand, to tactile, things you touch, very ergonomic and aesthetic based there. So that all ties together a bit with, there is something on my wall of toys up there. If you look up in the upper here.
So you're sitting in your shop, and behind you, you've got just gads of just these trinkets and toys and Bop-Its galore.
Sculptures, I like to call them, even though they're mass produced. But yes, there are all this genre of handheld electronic three-dimensional games. And one of them is the sand claw, which a lot of people recognize on beaches littered throughout the world. But the story of this was, it was actually in the final sort of months of my time at Discovery Toys. There, we were looking to do some new beach toys there. And they didn't want to go with this. I said, what about a new way? I would watch kids dig. And, when you dig, or you look at a dog dig in the sand, of course, we all watch them. They just like digging big holes in the beach. And, we all sort of dig that way, but it kind of hurts your fingernails. And so I designed this little sand claw that I worked with kids on how it doesn't really fit my hand very well, but, you grab it like this. And so this back piece, pushes against here. So you can dig like this. You've probably seen them, kids with two of them at once. It didn't exist before this. No one had done one. I actually looked into getting a patent, but didn't get one because it was the first thing that I really designed and went to say that Discovery Toys didn't want to do it. And at the time I heard you could license ideas to toy companies. So I went out and found a small toy company in the Midwest that licensed it from me. It started to sell pretty well. It was this little blow molded, sand claw that fit over your hand, cost about $1 to make, and they sold it for probably $2, And so it was selling well, but we didn't patent it, and it started to get knocked off everywhere. And now it's everywhere. You see it, and people have probably just assume it's a generic thing, which it is. And I did make royalties on it for a while, but it sort of, in a way, I almost feel is more powerful as shareware, that everyone can do it. It's out there. I'm proud that the first thing I created and brought into the world as an invention is growing still 30 years later. And it's sort of at the end of the day, you want to make money on things, but it's really the pride of giving birth to something that you created or that you brought, you channeled, whatever that is. I think that's why I tell this long story, is this really got me hooked on the idea that you could create something iconic that people, it's like getting applause when you perform. The applause is that people use it and they enjoy it. So the money is nice, but it's really incredible to see this everywhere 30 years later.
Yeah, the money as an inventor is sort of an interesting balance of, I know a lot of inventors that start to be an inventor. You've got to have like that day job, that the consulting gigs, to help support the inventing habit initially.
Absolutely. And that, my architectural sketching, my render, all that was necessary as a freelancer to allow me some time, after hours or on off days to sort of come up with ideas that I used the same skill set that I had, as you know, with your business, I know, but it really did help to have a shop and have all the things that you need to do industrial design, but then, tinker in your spare time.
So I want to go back to something here. I think of you being one of the more creative people I've ever met. And I think of like Einstein, who in like 1 year had like this miracle year of drafting 4 papers that changed the world, theory of relativity and everything that we know. You've seemed to have been struck by this creative lightning more than once, like over and over and over again. And I don't think it's an accident. I hear you talking about this claw, and you're watching people, you're watching how kids dig, and you're watching how a dog digs, and somehow you're able to connect those wires of, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing how people move, how they interact, what they love, what hits their heart, and lightning strikes your brain, and you have an idea. Like, how is it that you're able to do that over and over again? Like this Einstein of toy inventing.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do believe, I really like the way you just described that whole feeling, it's more, what does it feel like to the inventor to have that experience? You've done a great job of saying that feeling of watching and looking and thinking, and all of a sudden, I think most people, you don't have to be an inventor to have had that feeling about humans are great problem solvers, that we're built to do that. And the difference is this little, I think, extra taking on this sort of feeling that you just have to have a sense of what's been done before. And first off, making sure you don't fall into the trap of kind of going down obvious. I don't know what that is, but I've always had a sense of, that's what hasn't been done. What's the white space that hasn't been done? And today, of course, you can Google things, you can do a lot to find that out. But I think some people just have a little more intuitive sense that this probably hasn't been tried yet, or it's been tried, but everything you just said about the, going to the heart of wanting to empower play and watching kids dig and all that, it's assuming someone probably already has thought of it. So what are you going to do to push just to do something that maybe they haven't? Like that is definitely that when the lightning bolt hits, it isn't complete yet. Other people have probably had this lightning bolt because, it comes from all the zeitgeist. What are you going to do? And so in this case, I think it was the aesthetic of this claw. It was knowing how to make it in a one-piece blow molded shell. Like, there's a lot of ways you could execute this idea of a thing that fits over your hand that helps you dig and your fingernails. But
Wolverine.
What's that?
It's like Wolverine claws.
Right. It's been done, but you could imagine 100 different ways to execute this. And that's, jumping around a little. I think I told you I've had this mantra that I made up once for a class. I was giving a talk on just this very thing. Like, how do you know when your invention is right? How do you know when it is possibly the next lightning bolt? So I came up with an acronym, RITE, R-I-T-E. When is your invention right? How do you know? And the important thing here is, how do you know when it's right? It's about a self-reflection of having a concept, having this, light bulb go off, and then testing out, well, is it really everything I think it is? Because we all get great ideas and wake up in the morning and go, that's not so good. So this is RITE, and the I stands for idea, innovation. That's sort of the easy part, because lots of people have ideas. But think of RITE as 4 legs of a table. And each leg of that table has to be sturdy, stable, and strong, the same height. So you have an RITE of these 4 legs. Relationship, idea, timing, and execution are the 4 legs of this table. And the reason the relationship leg is first is because it's not just, who you know. that kind of relationship. It is some of that, in terms of your idea being right, but it's really about understanding your audience. Who is this for? And not just the consumer audience, but the toy company or any entrepreneur, but who are you trying to sell this to? Do you understand them enough? That's more important than the idea. You better understand that before you think. You can't have a good idea with no concept of who it's for. So the R is first, relationship. Really build those relationships, really understand it. Who are you selling your idea to and who's going to use it? The I is and is that leg tall enough? Is it just a short, stumpy little leg? I know one person, or is it lots of people? Build the leg. The idea, is this a 5 out of 10? Is it a 10 out of 10? How good is this idea really compared to your other ideas? So you start to visualize the height of these legs. Well, we all know if that's all you had, the table would tip over and your invention couldn't sit on it because, right, you need 4 legs for this table to stand. So the third leg being timing, RITE. We all know a great idea is only as great as its timing often. So that's a huge thing. If you think you have a great idea, well, the timing could be as much as there's been too many things similar like this in the past, or the timing's bad because, it's just not, it's not on trend. It could be just bad timing because of, people aren't into that thing anymore, whatever that thing you're coming up with, or often timing it's just luck. But you can affect timing by your relationships, by research. You understand when is the right time to bring something out. So if your timing leg isn't tall enough, don't pursue the idea yet. The last one being execution, which is the E, which is what we were just talking about here. Okay, you have this idea. It's first digging in the sand easier. It's amazing. It's going to be great. You know who to sell it to. Everything's, all the legs of the table are tall, but you don't know how to actually execute it. Or you do it and it's like, everyone's all excited when you describe it verbally and they go, yeah, never mind. That thing looks, I would never put that on my hand. So that's the design part. What is the execution? So you could have all of those things be completely the tallest legs of any table you could possibly build. But if you have this teeny little leg on execution, because it's not very good design, it'll still fall over. So it isn't a how to invent. This is a how to reflect on your own ideas table. That's what I call how to know when your invention is right. So that's, something I usually talk about near the end of something to kind of tie it all together. But I think it's important to talk about that now going forward with the rest of our conversation, because it gives everyone a model of visualizing all these things sitting on a table and what were those 4 legs like for each of these, breakthrough inventions.
That's good stuff. I know there's some tricky ones like with timing. You get a lot of inventors that have got this idea and they're even afraid to put it out there.
Yeah.
Or they put it out there one time and they get rejected and they're done.
Well, think of like I know you interviewed Ren about Twister. The timing of or are you have interviewed or you're going to interview
That's
him?
Tomorrow.
Oh, it's tomorrow. Well, talk about timing, just the whole story of the timing of Twister and how it was saved. He'll tell you that. But I think that's, that's luck. There's a lot of luck, but it's a lot of, I think, to be an inventor that channels more than one idea that hits, you have to be super aware of all 4 of those things. And that's, I think, or lucky that you partnered with someone who had the design skill and, the right company. So it's really important, I think, to look at your own, self-reflect on your ideas, because the biggest fault most people have is they just fall in love with their own idea and they don't listen to others. They don't really let it ever get bigger than the first initial impulse.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So I know that was that's my rant on that, right?
We all need creative rants, and we need a little bit of structure to help the creatives as well.
Yeah.
It's like balance of artistry and engineering for sure. So backing up, after the Sand Claw, you had ended up introducing a toy to the world that ended up changing play as we know it. And that's a pretty big lightning bolt to end up with Bop It, of all things.
Yeah.
Could you give us a little bit of that? Like how does that strike you? Like how is that right?
Well, I'll give you possibly the timeline that is important. Is like I said, I was working on remote controls as a freelancer for Memorex, these handheld remotes, where universal remotes were one of the first times you could buy a remote for any TV. You didn't have to use the remote that came with your TV. So they had come up with this, and I was designing remotes for them that were cool little universal remotes. So while I was doing that, I had done the Sandclaw, I'd done a couple other games that I had licensed to Milton Bradley at the time. Go Worms is a very little known game, if you want to look it up. That was my first game I licensed. And that I was thinking, though, what would happen? Why couldn't we make remotes for kids? What about a remote that was more of a game? You got this handheld thing in your hand. Why does it look like this? Could it do something else besides just be a thing with buttons on it? And that led me to this concept called remotes out of control. It actually got made. This is a couch potato. And
so it's a remote that looks like a potato. Look
like
at that.
A potato. Just that was more of a joke, and it looks like a potato with a brown remote with a bunch of bumps on it that are the remote that are looks like a potato. That's it. It's called the couch potato remote. And one of the ones that was more infamous here is this slice of pizza. It's a remote controller that looks like a slice of pizza. So I thought it was funny that you could have this slice of pizza on your coffee table, and it had buttons on it. The pepperoni is the power button. There's some peppers on there. There's some mushrooms that are the on off. You've got so it was just funny that is it more of a joke, right? But that's just it's called a remote by the slice. And then I had another remote because there was this idea of doing something that made people more physical. These are still things that you press buttons with your thumbs. And I said, what about a thing more physical that makes the kid move? And so this was this idea for a remote called the Channel Bopper that you bop on a coffee table to go channel up. You turn it around and bop the other direction for channel down. You twist volume and you pull for on off. So that's all you really need. You didn't need buttons for anything. If it was a universal remote, the idea was you just pound on the table till you get the channel you want. Back before there were 5,000 channels, and they didn't want to do it. The company that did these remotes, it was too out of the box.
And what was that called again?
Channel Bopper.
Channel Bopper.
Because you bop it on the table to change channels. Yeah. So Channel Bopper was rejected there as a remote. I had this mock-up for it. This one's the one that transformed later, but it was similar to this that was marked as a remote control. And that sat there until later I had a company, Tiger Electronics, call me and say, we're looking for more handheld LCD games. The innovation has stopped, and do you have any ideas for new handheld LCD games? And I looked over at the hammer and thought, well, what if it was, again, same thing as the remote. Instead of pushing buttons with your thumbs on a handheld game, what about a thing you pick up and you bang on the table? So I tried to turn Channel Bopper into a LCD game that you bop on the table and smash the characters. Didn't quite work. And then it was, well, what if there was no screen? What if there wasn't a screen? Is it possible to do a game more like Simon with lights? So I actually tried it, and it was actually kind of hard. And the idea of doing a memory game was not as fun when you had to do it with physical motions. I think we take for granted in a game like Simon how much pattern recognition takes so much focus that it's actually not as fun to have to do physical gestures with the memory. It's much, more mass market to just push the buttons and do memory. So I said, well, what if it was maybe only 4 moves in a row? What if it was 3 moves in a row? What if it was 2? What if it was just 1 move in a row? Would you ever fail if all you had to do was 1 move in a row? And that's how this game evolved into bopping, either on the table or your hand, bop it, twist instead of volume, twist. It just told you what to do and pull it. So bop it, twist it, pull it came from the DNA of intentionally trying to take handheld electronic device and make it more physically 3-dimensional, right? More sculptural, more tactile, everything I like to do, touchy, feely, things that look like what they do. The bopper looks like a bop, the twister looks like a twist. But the biggest epiphany was, would it work with 1 move at a time, which we now take for granted because we all know it works. But those are the leaps, when you say, where's the lightning strike? It's like you're zeroing in on it, and then you go, well, is the idea big enough yet? And knowing that it's not quite right. It's not RITE right. And so having the perseverance to keep working on it until you go, I think, and then go, wow, that's it. Experimenting, that's a very common thing with inventors. So Bop It evolved out of that. I tested it out in a video test where I dubbed the sounds and used this foam core model with me just playing it on a screen so you could see it with the audio, with my voice. And it was like, it's fun to watch. When I pretended to play it, I could tell that it was fun to play. And then the fact that I sped up, meaning you probably wouldn't fail unless you speed up the audio. So by speeding up the audio, you could get the sense that it's just harder than you think to do 3 different things. And maybe it's the audio processing, whatever's going on. But just trying to zero in on the real, crux of most inventors is that little moment where you just switch one little thing, or you decide to break a rule and it works. Those are the most wonderful moments. And luckily then the relationships I had developed already, it was able to be communicated. And then, as we know on the whole other side of inventing, the right people, speaking of right, had it in their hands and continued to work on it and make it a wonderful game.
Oh my gosh. So going from one big, you could have taken your failure of a bopping controller and climbed into a hole and just sort of given up at that point and just shelved that. Like, well, that's enough failure for the day. Nobody likes this.
Yeah, it's all those rejections, can definitely be like body blows that you have to keep taking. But I think failure, as most people who fail for a living, like I do, and you do, often when you fail for a living, what are you doing? Well, think of, I want to build some sort of model. Think of failure as, you build something, it gets broken down into little pieces. It's crushed. Those little pieces have to be your building blocks for the next thing. And that's kind of what failure is. Failure, if you choose failure is building blocks. And so if you either get lucky at some point or you look at the learnings from the failures, or there's a piece of that you just have to pull that out of the rubble and put it somewhere else, the building blocks of failure are the most important part of it.
It's failure, the Lego of invention. Huh?
Yeah, right. It's break it into little pieces. That's maybe the learning from it. But that's sort of the story. The continuing theme then of Bop It has been to have learned through that process the real DNA, which is, there was humor that emerged. There was this rhythm, and I owe a lot of it to this great designer at Hasbro at the time, Bob Welch, who was the one who then took it and made the beautiful industrial design. And, really the fact if we weren't sort of, mind melded in some some separated at birth way, it never would have happened either. So that the execution side of it was that there was a person there that really got it and made it happen. And so that's a big part of toy invention side, when you're not seeing an invention all the way through. But then after that happened, all the subsequent, this wall of Bop-Its behind me, I started to get involved more and more in the actual development, and my group, KID group, with my partners, Gary and Brian, started to take on the coding, the music. We did the sound production. We did, we then took on the actual refining and honing of Bop-It, as well as working much more in collaboration with the Hasbro designers through the years, so that all these other spin-offs and inventions we've done all had sort of a consistency to them, and just have loved it. It's been a great collaboration.
Something, just being a veteran now, the pitch is easy, right?
Yeah.
there's a time, like, when somebody's a startup inventor, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, you have no idea what to expect, what to say, what to bring.
You feel that it's hard as a startup inventor. You're sort of lost, not knowing where to start or what's the priority, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think that's what's interesting, is, to me, that's why sometimes a novice inventor will come up with some of the freshest out of the box ideas, because they're not jaded yet. Think about songwriters. Think about what people do in their youth is some of those valuable brain cells they have, because there's so much white space for them. So as much as you can have all these rules, it's also important to never underestimate the power of someone who doesn't know any better. Entrepreneurs, think of it. However, if you fail, then you're just called delusional, And so a genius is someone who's deluded but doesn't fail. That's my definition. So I think,
Well, I don't know. It's like all of the cartoon movies. Like, there's so many movies where the underdog or it's like crazy old Maurice. You've got like all the inventors. You got Flick from Bug's Life, even Tinkerbell, like this outcast. Like, they're all the inventors for some reason.
Yeah, that's right. You have to be kind of crazy. You have to, I think, like I said, I often think of delusion. Delude yourself. Allow yourself temporary delusion, so you don't block a path that you really feel. You let yourself go into that mode where all the great creations of the world. I believe you can just sense that when they become truly iconic, that person was possessed with a vision, and they just stuck to their vision and they really let it fly. And it's hard. It's hard to keep that when you know too much. It's hard to keep that consistency. So as much as you can calculate how to come up with a hit, or you think you know a lot, you still, the most powerful thing is someone who just has a vision.
Yeah. It's one of the things as an inventor that, nobody has the same imagination that you have. And when you have this idea and you've stewed on it and you've tried getting it out and you've made a prototype, there's something about trying to relay and convey your imagination to people the best way possible.
Yeah.
And your pitch video for Bop It, originally, you had a foam core model and you recorded, there it is, and you recorded your voice, like that little bit of movie magic, but...
oh, yeah. Well, it is today with TikTok, and, it's showing the power of creating a short video to convey a message, an idea, humor. People are getting really good at it. And that's, a lot of the skill involved is, if you can't do a 1-minute video of an idea today, at least probably toys or almost any idea, if you can't convey it in a minute, it's probably too complicated to pursue in the first place. And people are getting really good at that. I have to get better at it. We all have to say, wow, I better up my game. Having a great prototype that's just wows people, like, look at that thing, it flips and twists, it does this. That's of course the other side. Mechanical invention, true engineering innovation is a whole other side of things. But when you come down to just the concept of a game and selling people on, why do you want this experience? how do I make sure that you want the experience of the thing I'm pitching you? That's the art of, I think, true concept communication. And my advice there is just get really good at it.
So practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many different Bop-Its are there out there now?
I have been asked that question a lot, and one of these days I'm going to count them. But it's been 25 years. You know, there's at least one every other year, a new one. There's some that are just refreshes of the same idea, but even then, we've added new features. You know, like Bop It Extreme then had a little bit of a, you know, we added a feature here, we added a shout, we keep experimenting. It's a very, very flexible idea. I often, when I go to schools and I teach with kids, I'll say, hey, you know, Bop It, yeah, let's invent a new one today. What else should it have? You know, any kid can come up with 27 things a Bop It could do that it doesn't already do. Like it's too many options. You know, you can anything. So it's a little hard to you know, well, what's next? What should we do? And so that through the years, there's, you know, trying to keep it sort of iconic, but experiment with it. But it's like 25 different iterations is the last I kind of counted, including then had the concept of how to apply it to characters. So there's R2-D2 Bop It and Yoda Bop It and, you know, Groot Bop It. When you fail, he just says, I am Groot, you know, every single time. So there's a lot of humor that's translatable with it. And it's just the simplicity of say, you know, do this and you have to do it. It's that has never gotten old. It's just, you know, there's even more, so much more we can do with it. It's so simple. And maybe that's, you know, why I think it'll just keep growing.
Glorious. And so this was pitched initially just to Hasbro out the gate.
No, there was 6 or 7, 8, 9, I don't know. Lots of companies saw the after it was not wanting to be a remote, and I started to come up with it as, hey, I think it's the game. Tiger rejected it, even though I showed them, hey, this thing, they kind of saw a Bop It. Didn't do it. Bunch of companies in the time I showed it. It was just one of many concepts at a pitch meeting. Once they saw Bop It was a hit, they're all like, oh, I should have done that. It's like, no, you shouldn't. It ended up with the right company. You know, the point is, it could have ended up with someone else and just been some you know, it really needed the right partner. So that's never, I think that's a big part of finding the right match for your idea. But that's, you know, so that's kind of the line of Bop It. What I learned from it and applied to other things was just simply that staying in the physical, tactile. Perplexus, as you mentioned, was a game that this amazing guy, Michael McGinnis, brought to me this concept. I usually don't look at other people's ideas, but one of the guys that worked for me had a sister and he was her teacher and said, you know, he wanted to know about toys. So I had him come in, this is 20 something years ago. And he showed me this little box with these little mazes that he had made that they were impossible. I think they were called impossible mazes. And they were the most intricate things with the little BB that you could imagine. But they had this one feature that you could play them on both sides and that they would sort of flip over. I was like, wait a minute, that's that little lightning bolt feeling of there's something there. I loved that when it wasn't so much that the ball, how the maze worked, is that it made the person move more. So that's the key with Bop It. That was the animate the person idea that led to it from don't use your thumbs. How can I move you? How can the game move the person? And so I saw that with that little teeny little box that he had. I was like, that's not going to sell the way it is. But if you want to work, I never work with anyone, but if you want to help work with me, I'll talk to you. I'll sort of let's talk about what to do with this. And so I envisioned Perplexus as being this whole big thing with iconic spirals. Like what you see today was sort of the Bop It version of what he had. It was how to turn everything into this big move. And I wanted to make it round instead of square. I just said it needs to be like the whole vision was, you know, an amazing collaboration. And then he built the model. So it never would have happened if he had said, no, thanks for the lousy advice and left. He's this amazing guy. We've become great friends, and incredibly talented guy. So he had the ability to execute that vision. And that's how Perplexus eventually came. And there's been probably more Perplexus versions than Bop-Its. It's a pretty amazing product.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. That's one of those that you just look at and like, how is that even possible? Like there's so many parts in that.
It's an engineering feat, and a sculptural feat. And in fact, Michael makes these beautiful wooden sculptures for museums based on Perplexus. And he gave me one for my significant birthday, and it's my most cherished possession. This giant wooden Perplexus is just beautiful.
It's awesome.
So cool. So it's a pretty amazing process going through, and like knowing you, it's like there's like this perpetual optimism of like, because you have just like this sea of ideas, more and more ideas, like all the time when you build off of those, failures, which aren't even failures in your book. It's just those next stepping stones. Are there some like major hurdles that are like the hardest aspects of being an inventor, a designer, that you find yourself sometimes just completely swallowed up by?
Yeah, I think it's all the business models of different professions. In terms of being an entrepreneur, if you go broader with it, probably in common with most, it's that, you can only fail so many times without success before you just can't beat your head against the wall. And it might be just around the corner of that wall, but you didn't see it. And so you quit too early, and you don't know until you try. I think the faith that you need, finding the right match, the hardest thing being you can have something in your closet. Hyperdash is a pretty well-known game that I did. It was in my closet for 12 years. I thought, why isn't anyone buying this? It's great. It's like kind of Bop It like. It tells you what to do, but it makes you run around your yard. It was great for kids. Hyperdash is the game where you have these cones. There's colors. You set out the cones, and it says red, and you run. You decide where the cones go. But it just simply makes a game as big or small as you want. We tested it with kids. Everyone loved it. And every single company said, well, it's not, blah, blah, blah. They always have reasons that I don't even want to say what they are. People say, why? I say, it doesn't matter. What matters is they didn't see the vision that I had. Like you said, it's about someone else seeing the vision and feeling it. And either you're not communicating it right, or you just haven't, or you're ahead of your time. You don't know. So it was shown on and off for over 12 years until I had lunch with the right person at the right time, which was Danny Grossman from Wild Planet. And he said, why don't we ever do anything with you? I said, well, we don't do science spy stuff, which is what you guys are into. He goes, well, what do you do? He asked the right question. Well, I said, well, I mostly focus on games. Well, is there anything we should do as a game? Well, you guys don't do games, do you? Well, we might. Oh, well, there's this one game that every single company has rejected 3 times. And I think it's the best thing we have. I really don't understand. Well, show it to me. So talk about the relationship. And I had been having lunch with him once a year, just to have lunch, because we never sold him anything and he was local. And we said, why don't we have lunch once a year? So there's the relationship side. So he says it. I run up to my office because we were having lunch at a Hunan place around the block. Both our offices were close to each other. He's like the closest toy company in the world we sell things all over the world, never to him. So we showed him, because I like this. Let's test it. He goes, test it. You're right. Kids really love it. I mean, it never even got to testing with any of the big companies. They were just so sure it wasn't, for some reason, didn't float their boat. He does it. It goes crazy. He figures out a way to sell it on Amazon. And back in the early days of Amazon, it gets mommy blogged to death because it's for your kids. Like we said, hey, it's actually good for your kid. They run. And it happened to coincide with the time when blogs. So the timing was good. The timing leg was good, where it communicated to the right audience. It had the right company behind it who was willing to reach that audience. And it was executed well. It was this cool little quirky cup. And it took off. It was like the number one game. People don't remember. It outsold Bop It for like 2 years. It was pretty big. And on Amazon, it was kind of later after Bop It had faded a little. And it launched this whole line of exercise games and toys for them, which changed their company. Just because we had lunch that one day that said, why don't we work together? So I don't know, and I didn't quite answer the question of it is about optimism, and it is about, like, you're not going to sell something if you stop showing it. But I do get burnt out. It is very, very hard. We had a big product drop yesterday, as a matter of fact, a very, very disappointing phone call. It is the worst, as you know. You can have this thing, optimism, you finally get one, and so many ways that a product gets dropped. It is very, very hard. So one is just the reality of if you can't afford to do it anymore because you just rolled the dice too many times, and you need enough success to sustain yourself mentally and financially. But I do it because, I still have I have this other idea. I really want to see if I can get this out there. It's more about that thing we talked about in the beginning, the thrill of bringing something into the world that is a different point of view, a different experience. It's really like your destiny. If you have a vision for something and it's really hard to see it, to be convinced it's good and it will connect you to people. People will like it, they'll relate, but nobody wants to do it. So now what do you do? So you have to make that decision at some point to give up, put it back in the cupboard, wait 5 years, or just move on to something. So there is no easy answer there. But, the long answer to, failure and all those things is it's really, it could go many different ways. And I think you have to be flexible. And it's very personal to what you can financially and mentally sustain. As a creative outlet, I've been doing a lot of social media to celebrate the 25th year of Bop It primarily, but also the fun of creating, little how-to videos or quirky stories or just having fun with the voice of Bop It. I love that I can create things in an hour and put them out there and know within 10 minutes whether people like it or not. That's insanely, it's a great release compared to the toy industry timeline, just for the fun of getting feedback on your creativity.
Congratulations on that, by the way. 25-year run of just like a top shelf product like that, Bop It, just that's been in all social media, on TV shows and big screens on the stadiums, you name it. It's been everywhere. Congrats on that. Wow, what are you doing? You've got some plans with this 25-year landmark?
I do. There are lots of plans. The main thing is I'm doing a book called, which we don't know the name of. I'm actually meeting with the publisher Friday. There are some possible names. Love to hear people's ideas for that. The first name I had was this is sort of the mock-up of the book. Here, I got to show you take this book and bop it. And of course, it's got to have a real Bop It button on the front of it that you can bop. So it's the first, it's the Bop It book. It's either the official big book of Bop It. Take this book and bop it. And it's basically from invention to pop culture phenomenon, that sort of idea, that it's covering that, it's telling the stories. I like the name Bop Culture. I thought that was kind of a cool name for the book, but it's trying to appeal to kids from the 90s, mostly, that played it. It's a very iconic 90s meme, it's something that's been repeated and spoofed and in media. So beyond the game, it meant a lot to kids in the 90s growing up, and now there are 30-somethings. So this is a book for them about how did it get invented, some of the stories we've talked about. What are the things that went right along the way? What are the weird stories? And I've interviewed probably 20 different people that were involved, from the designer to the voices to the engineers, the marketing people, how it almost didn't come, like the chairman of the company. So it's really a little bit for industry people, like cool, nod to them, but it's also for any fan that just interested in the iconic Bop It story and how it, and all the funny spoofs, like The Simpsons did an amazing spoof on it. Saturday Night Live's done spoofs. About 1 million people online have done spoofs on Bop It, and so I'm featuring some of those, just celebrating the phenomenon to have embedded itself into culture like that.
It definitely changes things.
Yeah, and then this is then detachable from the book, but it's sold separately, calling it the Uni-Bop, and trying to do this. It's part of a program that I've also started this year with my wife, Alicia, called Bop It for Good. And so I've started a Shopify store website where I am extremely grateful for the success of Bop It for everything in my career, but because that's the most visible, and it is the 25th anniversary, taking it as an opportunity to start a program that gives back. And my point is, give back, but make it fun for everyone. Part of the giving back is creating a fun experience, a site that sort of is the homepage for all things kind of Bop It fans. I'm creating some nice swag, merchandise, and creating some custom products like this, where I'm trying to involve celebrities to lend their voice inside here, some Easter eggs. So there's been a lot of celebrity fans who grew up with Bop It who go crazy when I say I'm the inventor of Bop It. You can reach a lot of people. So I'm trying to tap on them to say, how would you like to have a surprise, cameo in this thing? So we'll see what happens, but this hopefully comes out later this year or early next as a celebration and a give back that there's a few different charities that we're looking at. So it's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
To have a couple of celebrity Easter eggs in there, I can imagine Liam Neeson or something popping in there, like, I have a special set of skills. You better bop it. Whatever it is, I don't do a Liam Neeson voice. But
you know what? I'm trying to reach out and say, who do you think it should be? The number one voice? Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh yeah.
Let's not repeat what people think he would say to you, but
it's the definitely has a rating.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, it's unbelievable getting to hear the stories, some of the struggles, the ideation, where things come, like how an idea comes up. I really am thankful that you've been able to go through and share this story with us. Before we part, we just got one last question, I think. Why don't we go ahead and just roll and see what sort of question we get? We've got our hidden roll dice here, and don't really know what we're going to ask you, but we've got one final parting question before we go.
Let's see.
And we've got some crossbones. So competitive spirit. When you go to play a game and you're going to battle, what game is it that you just must win at all costs?
All of them, but I'd say the one that I'm most, my blood really boils when I'm not. Well, there's two categories. The first one is cribbage.
Ooh.
Believe it or not, with my 94-year-old father. We've been playing for 50 years, so there's quite a competition there, and he's still really good at it. So I really get upset when I don't know if you played cribbage, but it's there's a lot of luck, there's a little skill, there's a lot of reading people's intentions, but there are a few other games out there, gamery games. There's one that's really vicious, and if you've ever played Sheriff of Nottingham, it's a bluff game. I don't know why.
One of the greats.
It just makes me so, it's a pretty good one if you haven't played that. So things like that, not electronic games, to be honest, but I like to win as many things as I can. The one thing about competition, though, I'd like to add in terms of when you talk about sustainability in this industry, honestly, it's the people, maybe the relationships of the peer group itself and the toy company founders and the people I've met. That has just been, I just feel so lucky to be part of it, to be one member of this incredible group of people that have done everything you've described, taken a chance, done however they got here. It's just, I just love every one of them. And it has been why I've stuck around doing it, is I really love the people. And so as a tribe of, we all know how hard it is. We all, enjoy each other's success. You might be a little competitive, wish you came up with it, those things. But I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't met all these great people through the process. So what you're left with, whether you fail, you hopefully succeed enough that you're not, you're able to do it. But that is the competitive sort of cooperative feeling I have. Came up when you rolled the dice. That's what I thought of as competition. I was thinking of people, not the game. But I think that's just the most awesome part about this industry.
Oh, it is. Yeah. I think of like People of Play, the events at ShyTag. I think you and I probably even met at ShyTag.
We did, yeah.
And it's the one world where, we could be called competitors, both game inventors and developers, but yet the day at the show ends and then we all go to the pub and play games till 2 a.m.
Yeah. Luckily, our profession is making and playing games, so you can connect. You have something in common. But it is funny because as I've traveled the world with many of these friends now, you, interestingly, in that you're never going to talk about the products you're working on, the confidentiality of what you're doing. So, what do you talk about? Families, friends, life. So because you're not talking about work or too many, you whine about things. People, talk about it again. But I found that's what's kind of cool about it.
That's a good insight. How often do we, what do you do? It's like the question. And suddenly you get past that facade and get to the real person when you're one game inventor to the next.
Yeah, it is cool. So that's been amazing. And I just think, as everything's changing, but that is the one thing, as we know, you're building friendships along the way, and most people, I think, would put a pretty high value on that.
Priceless. Well, again, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to dive down memory lane with us.
Absolutely.
Beautiful seeing the story, and the way you just walked us through the creative process. It's so hard to put a finger on how an idea just comes into being, but it seems that you've got your finger on that pulse. So again, thanks for the time.
Thanks. I don't know that I really have, in terms of process, I don't actually, it's not like IDEO or someone that has a formal process, but I think it is more, it's the process is the passion is maybe what I would say. You just, you'll know it when you have it. So it's just relentlessness. But anyway, thanks guys. Really enjoyed it. I always learn something new when I hear myself talk.
Glorious. Well,
so we'll catch you later.
Till next time. I guess we bop it to start.
That's right.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way that you can support us is to like, thumbs up, comment, or leave a review and share us with your favorite brains. Follow Hidden Roll Podcast anywhere that podcasts can be found. If you want to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is also available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, let us know on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send us an inquiry at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. That's Hidden Roll, ROLE, podcast.com. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.